I'm Kathleen Gasenica. I'm a lifelong friend of the oceans and a over 30-year supporter of clean ocean action. And we're here in Victory Park in Rumson, New Jersey, and going to tell you all about horseshoe crabs today.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having us. I'm Dave Grant and happy to be here for World Ocean Days and Clean Ocean Action, which I have been a participant in for more years than I can remember. We're excited to be down here at Victory Park, a hot spot for what I consider the most interesting creature on the shore, the horseshoe crab. So Kathleen, I know why I'm interested in horseshoe crabs, and I'm going to talk about that. And I've done considerable work in those. I'm curious what interests you about them.
Well, when I first started working in the ocean environment, educating thousands of students on both the ocean and the marsh side, I was just fascinated by them in the spring when they come ashore. And when I first started doing this, you could actually have a hard time walking on the beach without stepping on them. And we developed what we call the horseshoe crab shuffle when we go in with our seine nets, and that's never picking your feet up so that you didn't step on a horseshoe crab. I started learning about them and realizing that they were in danger of being over-harvested and a bunch of other reasons that Dave will go into. And then I found out that they've been around for over 450 million years, and it really put things in perspective for me. So it is by far my most favorite marine animal, and really excited to help everybody learn more about them.
They are a crowd pleaser, we find.
Yes, they are.
I was lucky enough to be involved decades ago when early on they were being studied for their medicinal, well, not medicinal value, but biomedical use. This bit of powder in here is the processed blood of a horseshoe crab, and that's what makes them most famous and valuable. Is they're harvested in great numbers by the millions to process that blood, and it's used as an item to detect contamination, bacterial contamination, in anything that's put into the human body. Any injection, heart valves, any new joints, they're all tested with the processed horseshoe crab blood, the LAL, before to make sure there's no bacterial contamination of them.
Now, Dave, are they going to be using the LAL from the horseshoe crab in testing vaccines?
Not the vaccine itself, but to make sure the vaccine, like anything else that's injected in the human body, will get tested to make sure it doesn't have a bacterial contamination in it. So yes, so the answer is yes.
Particularly important during this pandemic when we are researching vaccines for the coronavirus.
Yeah, and staying 1 fathom apart.
Yes.
To protect ourselves. This is not a sample of the blood, but this is what the blood looks like when it comes out of the crab and is oxygenated. And our blood has iron in it and is red as a result. The horseshoe crab blood has copper in it, so it has this bluish-green color to it. And it's the cells in here that are processed and dried to become the limulus lysate here. So Kathleen, I'm wondering, you work a lot with younger students, and what's your hook to get them interested in horseshoe crabs? I mean, I have no problem with the science and medicine aspect.
Well, to be honest with you, it is such an interesting creature that I could just put this on the stage and they'd be mesmerized. But what I like to do is not only talk to them about the importance to humans, but the importance to the rest of the environment. And I start by saying they're a keystone species. So you know the keystone here, I'll let you hold that. The keystone is the top of the arch, and it's this stone right up here. And when you take the keystone out of the arch, what happens to the arch? It collapses. So if you take a keystone species out of the environment, it collapses the entire ecosystem. And so who's dependent on it? the eggs of the horseshoe crab are extremely important. And I'm going to let Dave take over the science again on that one.
Well, we do know they're high in protein and fat, and one of our most interesting birds is the red knot, a beautiful little shorebird that migrates through New Jersey on its way to the Arctic to lay its eggs.
And that's on the endangered list in New Jersey.
Yeah, their population has plummeted, and we think that's tied to the overharvest of horseshoe crabs. So New Jersey and Delaware have moved to limit the harvest of the crabs, and also with groups like Clean Ocean Action, develop programs to protect the nesting beaches for the crabs. So they're, as you say, as a keystone species. There are a lot of things that rely on them. Not just that one particular shorebird. All of the 29 species of shorebirds that we have along the coast here. Okay. Well, the anatomy of the horseshoe crab is quite interesting. The Latin name is Limulus polyphemus, side-looking cyclops, and that refers to the very curious dragonfly-like eyes that they have here. The eye's very complex. It's probably 1,000 times more sensitive than our vision, so they can get around easily at night trying to find a mate and get on the beach. So, you usually read they have 10 eyes, and if you search around the crab, you can see, of course, as I mentioned, the large compound eyes here, and there are more eyes in the front. They have 2 eyes down under near their mouth and front claws there. And they all have different purposes, and we're not entirely sure what all of those functions are, but even the tail is light sensitive, and that may be what helps them synchronize with the phases of the moon. Well, I'm sure, Kathleen, you'll tell us, why don't we want to pick a horseshoe crab up by the tail? I'm sure you scold many kids about that.
Well, it's kind of a scary looking animal when you first come upon it, and a lot of people are afraid. So they think it is a stinger, and it actually serves a couple of purposes. First of all, it's called a telson, and it's a very weak joint here. So if you do pick it up by the tail, it's likely to break off. And it uses it as for a couple reasons, as a rudder, and so steering when it's in the water, and also as a lever when it gets flipped over by the waves or whatever, like this. It will actually, this tail has a pretty good rotation, and it reaches down and flips itself back over with its tail. So if you come upon these on the beach and you see one on its backside, it's very vulnerable on this side. This is a really hard shell, but you want to flip it over. There's actually a program called Just Flip 'em or something like that. And flip it back over and bring it to the water's edge, because it's probably a little tired being exposed to the sun and drying out. It has gills, and I'm going to let Dave go into that, called book gills.
Yep, they look like the pages of a book here. This is not a great example, but they have an outer covering that protects them, so that when they're out of the water, they can keep the gills moist. But that's what the first thing that the seagulls go after are the soft gills. And of course, if they get torn up, that's the end of the line for the horseshoe crab.
So how many eggs does a female have each season?
About 80,000. And she'll come in.
Not all in one nest.
No, she'll come in several times in the spring. Again, usually associated with the spring tides. So come on. They came in 2 weeks ago on the new moon. She would have been cruising offshore here, and a male would have clipped onto her with his lucky bones, those special claws he has.
Can you show those? Or?
Yeah, we have a close-up of
Okay,
that
good.
show. And that stimulates her to come in and head to the beach. Apparently the males won't ask directions, so they rely on her. But she will start to plow in the sand right at the high tide mark. And she'll stop and she'll lay a couple of clumps of eggs about the size, the clumps are about the size of a golf ball. He'll fertilize them and then she'll move another foot or so, plow a little farther, she'll lay more, and she ends up making a U-turn and heading back out. And then she'll come in on the next spring tide and lay more.
Of the 80,000 eggs, how many of those will reach maturity?
I was hoping you'd ask that because, again, it may have been our buddy Bill Hall, but down at the University of Delaware, they like to say about 1 out of that 80,000, which is not unusual in nature.
No, that's why they have 80,000.
That's right, because the eggs that we'll look at when they hatch, I find them in the plankton sample for about a week, swimming around, and probably 90% of what's in the plankton on any given day gets eaten by other creatures. So it's the rare creature that survives.
Birds, other crabs.
Yeah. So,
True crabs.
Yeah. If we look on the beach here, we can see that this beach is disappearing, and it also has it's also bulkheaded. And this is a
picture of the cement.
This is a big problem with the horseshoe crabs and other creatures that use the beach, because the beach is trying to migrate inland and it can't because of the bulkhead. And then there are other things you wouldn't think were a problem. The floating dock behind us here is a crab crusher. At high tide that floats and the crabs will be under there spawning and being horseshoe crabs. And then when the tide goes out, they get trapped under there and killed. So there are a lot of different things that are a problem.
And then the part that Clean Ocean Action is very involved with, the non-point source pollution and the runoff pollution that's in the ocean, certainly can't be helping their health.
We like to scuba dive under the bridges here looking for artifacts, old bottles and things like that. And there have been times over the years diving where we spent the whole time underwater just cutting horseshoe crabs free from fishing line that were all...
They get trapped under the bridge.
Yeah, they're all tangled up in that. And so who knows how many of them don't make it because of secondary effects of our pollution. If I had to list all the reasons the ocean was important to me, we'd be here all day. But certainly horseshoe crabs and protecting the ocean and the creatures that live there is very high on my list. And it's a great way to introduce students and people to how valuable science is and also how great the ocean is. So I'm always happy to be down here. I'm happy to help out groups like Clean Ocean Action whenever we can. And I thoroughly enjoy studying every aspect of it.
So I agree with Dave. There's too many things to talk about that are important and the reasons that I enjoy it. But one of the reasons is that I get to work with brilliant scientists like Dave, and the horseshoe crab is such a great teaching tool. It's such a docile, calm animal and allows you to really examine it, and it brings us back to our beginning. And the other really basic important thing is that we breathe oxygen, as the horseshoe crab does, and without the oceans, they're accountable for up to 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. So as I tell my students, I said, try breathing every other breath, and that doesn't go very far. So that's at the foundation of everything. That's the main reason we need to help the ocean. And again, kudos to Clean Ocean Action for doing this for World Ocean Days.
And join Clean Ocean Action for a trip to the beach sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
Clean it up as well as study
the
horseshoe
beach
crabs.
sweeps. Over 70 sites. October 24th is the next beach sweep coming up.
Excellent.
Thanks
Thanks
Dave.
again.